Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. I am Nick Medlock. I'm a personal trainer and nutrition coach at Northwest Personal Training. And my co-host, as usual, is Dr. Trent Corey. And we're going to be talking about a subject that I absolutely love because in my profession, we do it all the time, along with strength training, followed by stretching. But I'm going to ask him a couple of different questions about stretching and then let him take it away as he is the doctor. So tell me, is stretching important in our lives?
Yeah, that's a good loaded question to start it off. Let's go. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question people will kind of pose to me because a lot of times, hey, I do these stretches all the time and nothing seems to change much or whatever, right? So it's kind of this thing like I don't really notice that I'm getting more flexible and those kind of things. And a lot of times, it's just basically how we're kind of creating more range. And being able to go a little further than what we're normally able to do, but also to be able to do that safely. And that's what a lot of people do. They end up kind of doing too much in the wrong way, and it causes issues. So we want to make sure that we do it in the correct way, and that we try to encourage movements through ranges of motion that are supportive for your joints and your tendons and ligaments and all those kind of things. So you don't, do something where you pull something accidentally, and that happens quite a bit, and that's too bad. So, and then also another thing I like to talk about is looking at how the whole body is a symmetrical whole, right? The whole connective body. So if you have a left hamstring thing and it's tight, yeah, I mean, you might be able to get some improvement with doing a hamstring stretch, but often there's something going on in your thoracic spine, or maybe even have to do something up here in your opposite shoulder. I've seen that a lot where we do movements in other places in the body, and then that movement that was restricted or tight it actually unwinds itself. And so that's kind of what I've seen a lot is, it's almost like your bodysuit from your shoulder to your hip. You got all this connective tissue and this can pull on this. So if your sweater kind of pulls you this way, you might not be able to go this way, or you might not be able to raise your arm as well because this is pulling tight. And it often isn't just due to because you need to stretch and pull into that. You go away from it and kind of even out the sweater, so to speak. And
Yeah.
I've had much better success with that kind of thing. So generally, yes, stretching, we need to go to end ranges of motion to get us moving better. Well, we have to do it in a little bit more direct way is kind of what I've found is really what will get the most effect for people. And it really does come down to like checking before and after how you're doing with that movement versus just kind of like stretching in good faith. I'm just gonna hold that stretch and
Yeah.
they just said it's good for me and I'm supposed to do this for 30 seconds or whatever you've been told. And even like right now I'm coaching high school, like sometimes these kids have just been told to stretch for 10 second or five. It's not very long. It's not going to make much of a change. So we want to do something with intention and actually see those actual shifts happen. And after your stretching session, you should feel more limber. And if you don't, there's usually some reason why. And that's probably what we'll talk about a little bit more about the nervous system, like you said.
Yeah. Well, I've got a couple of different questions based off of what you said. Because I found in my experience, I used to have extremely tight hamstrings and I would stretch them and overstretch them, and it didn't really help me touch my toes until I addressed my posture in my hips and the way that my hips were actually angled. So I'd love to talk more about the structure of our posture and how that affects. Do we actually lengthen our muscles when we stretch, or do we help to stabilize different things? And how much does our nervous system keep our muscles tight versus our muscles acting tight?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a great thing to talk about, Nick. That's wonderful. Because like, yeah, a lot of times we're tight or muscles kind of grab up, or hey, I got this spasm in my back. A lot of times we're finding that's basically due to some degree of an underlying instability, right? Or it's trying to hold on to create something other balance in another place in the body. And so the more we can kind of create more of a stable surface for our bodies to move, and we see this a lot. This is a really cool demo. I can't really do it in front of you right now, but basically, it's this. If you bend forward and touch your toes, you can kind of see how far you go. Many people, if you just put like a ball or a foam roller between your knees and you tighten it, you kind of squeeze it a little bit, that gives your pelvis some stability. And oftentimes, I mean, many, many times, people will go quite a bit further just because now you've created some base stability that the muscles that are, feeling tight, they're just not feeling like they have to turn on to put on the brakes to keep you safe. And so the more we can kind of create deep stability and basically have some good foundation to move from, then our body doesn't have that feeling of trying to hold itself back. It's trying to protect you and it's doing a good job for it. And a lot of times it gets blamed for just being tight, but oftentimes it's due to something else. It's basically due to that underlying instability. Like actually, it's not strong enough to hold you there. And so that's why those muscles are putting on the brakes, so to speak. And I love that term, just putting on the brakes. It's kind of what it's doing. It's just trying to say, hey, I don't know what this is going to mean. I need to make sure I keep you in a smaller range. So I at least know where I'm going to be here and I'll be safe here. Stretching, literally like that concept of like going further, stretching our goals. We're kind of going into the unknown a bit, right? So it's kind of this corollary of like, wow, I'm trying to push myself to this limit. And then there's this deep subconscious feeling of like, I need to stay safe. And so a body kind of goes, we got to be careful here. And so we try to merge and kind of hit that edge and making sure that we're stabilizing and breathing through it. And then we can kind of start to get to those new limits that become, what we own more, right? So as we breathe through the motion, that usually indicates our body's more at rest in that, and that we feel like, I like to say, you own that position now. So yeah.
Well, one of the things I do, speaking of breathing, in my yoga classes, and I do this as a personal trainer as well, I talk about getting the body out of fight or flight so that we can move a little bit better. I say we're more flexible, but I don't necessarily, I think that's a great analogy, but I don't think we're actually stretching our muscles as much as teaching our body to not be in fight or flight and hold those positions of fight or flight. We're actually relaxing our nervous system to be able to move a little bit more. How much of that do you find in your practice of stress inhibiting our movement?
Oh, like all the time. So yeah, a lot of times, especially neck tension, a lot of things are related. The scalenes just turn on all the time. You can watch somebody breathe and watch if they're tight and they're breathing up high, and that's going to cause these muscles to get tight. And a lot of times people are doing different stretches, or postural things are really good for that. But if this is just a manifestation of stress, we get stress in the jaw and the scalenes and upper trapezius, this muscle here. Usually most people have some really nasty trigger points in here. And what we find is that if we can at least get that feeling of fight or flight to relax, so we do different, breathing patterns, we can stimulate the vagus nerve. There's this really cool nice little technique you can do. Fingers underneath inside the ear, like right about here. And then you basically just do these little alternating back and forth. And like within a few minutes, I feel like actually a few seconds, I'm like, wow, that's nice. And so those kind of things I try to do if someone's kind of experiencing that whole body, fight or flight reflex type of thing. I mean, sometimes you'll have back pain. You got literally, because the adrenals are kind of tapped out, you actually have tenderness around in the kidney area and low back. And a lot of times it's just because we're just so amped up. And so really try to talk people through those strategies to calm down and find those ways to make it more of a habit. So during their day, they're able to, break free and have that little time for themselves, or, at least get connected to their body a bit, changing positions, allowing themselves to kind of, decompress a bit. I kind of think about it's like, those are cosmic, I think about like, I was using this term like cosmic problem, like, like we have, we get all wound up in our world, right? Our little box of our stuff, and it's like the biggest thing in the world. It's nice to kind of take that perspective, like the cosmic realm and how we're on this little planet flying around. It's like, chill out, man. You gotta we just sometimes it just takes that perspective, and not to be insensitive, but also just to understand, yeah, we're all in this together. And, these are things that, yeah, they're real, but, do we have to make the problem that, that big? I don't get deep into that, like what their problems are or whatever, but it's still, we got to kind of have a deep perspective of like connecting to our body. And the more we can be present with that moment, that will help us actually adapt and manage our stress better, because we actually have a working bandwidth to handle what you got going on, because you're managing yourself well. The more you can kind of have yourself be present and relaxed, you can have your head on a swivel a little bit more versus blinders where you just can't focus. So just allowing that to be more of you know, a mindset for folks when they come in, that we need to at least address and understand that that's part of a lot of people's problems, that we can just decrease this. The stats on the amount of stress and like related to, you know, musculoskeletal problems, but also just general issues, inflammation, all these things. There's just not a good thing with in excess of, you know, bad stress. We do need stress to adapt, right? We can't just be vegetables and just zen all day and, you know, nothing gets done. We got to be in the moment and do things. So there's that use stress, which is the good stress, and then there's distress. We need to make sure we have a good amount, because that actually creates our body to be strong and resilient to those things. We actually get stronger because of that. We don't wish the world to be a different place. We actually make ourselves stronger and more resilient, better adaptable to those things. And then, I mean, just with those types of pieces of advice, a lot of times people will dramatically decrease their pain. I've had people within a session, we just calm them down. We just get them on the table and do that for 20 minutes. And all of a sudden, I've worked in other places where, you know, the person comes in all stressed and wound up, and then they leave and they're like, wow, what did you do that? You know, they look like a completely different person. And that's just by the focus of, you know, just connecting to your body, connecting to your breath, dropping in, making sure your body's like, you know, it's all right. So I once we get that, then we can get into those deeper things, get into the stretching things that make us feel better. So
Yeah. Well, that leads me on to a couple of different things. I love that topic. I've had many clients come in just absolutely flustered at their day, and depends on the type of stress that I see, whether I make them do breath work or do slam ball work. So,
yeah,
but either it's that stress managed, I believe. But I want to focus more on the breathing aspect of it, because I want to lead into a different type of stretching and talk about it. But with the breath work in the psoas in particular, the diaphragm can help massage the top of the psoas and then help more of that mobility, because it's relaxing the muscle from the top. But I know there's a big thing out there right now on social media, for particularly like the psoas. Should you stretch those hip flexors, or should you strengthen them, or both? And then how does breath work and getting you out of the fight or flight nervous system type of thing help you with both of those angles?
yeah. So yeah, that's a good topic. I mean, you know, the diaphragm is, you know, probably after the heart, the most important muscle in the body, right? You know, number one, probably number two. I don't know. They're probably tied, you know, right? I probably like them both.
Yeah.
So super important to have those muscles relax and release. And sometimes we just like, you know, a good place to start with people, a lot of times when they are kind of amped up, is kind of connecting to breath, laying down, a lot of times getting the spine out of like compression, just allowing things to kind of lay like even on your side, and just kind of doing some rotational type movements, breathing deep and into the back parts of our ribs are really helpful. But then also, and then obviously the psoas is a huge connector from your lumbar spine. It connects way in your lumbar spine into the lesser trochanter of the femur. So it actually connects your upper body to your lower body. And it's super vital for those functions of just lifting your legs up, and then also just the stability. But if those muscles are locked up and tight, as with a lot of people with low back issues, they can cause compression of all those structures in between. So your SI joints, your discs, your facet joints in your lower back. And so we want to try to work on ways to get some areas moved and loosened up. A lot of times what we're trying to do is create balance in some way. So, you know, a lot of times, just kind of like I alluded to before with the opposing movements, what happens is we need to actually stabilize one side as we do the other. So like so it's a combination of the opposite glute with the hip flexor, and trying to get into these kind of the split squat position, which has been kind of more in vogue. It's really been helpful, that we're trying to actually create length under load. So actually trying to lengthen while the body's tensing up, versus just kind of, you know, hanging out there and just like letting that just lengthen. So it's just what I found, it's really helpful to kind of get more into more active positions that you can kind of work through and try to have support with it. So you're not just kind of hanging and working too hard and straining, but you have that support on there. And then you can kind of cycle through that and just kind of get used to going a little further as you feel comfortable. But there's no rush to get to there. And I think that's kind of the thing. Like, I have Ben Patrick's book, like the knees over toes guy. His
One of
picture,
my,
the cover
yeah.
is ridiculous. Let me see if I have it here. Oh, is this it? No, oh, but he's got this crazy picture of him just kind of doing this whole split squat position. And it's just way too far for most people, right? So we want to make sure we're getting length, but I love the strategy to just kind of gently start to move ourselves forward. If you put your foot up on a step and you do, if you kind of do this kind of move, if I got my foot up on here, and then I'm just kind of doing here, and then I'm trying to go a little forward like this, but I don't want to arch
Yeah.
my back, right? So you just kind of find the position and kind of work through that. A lot of people do
Mhm.
really well with that kind of like a pulsing type movement, and it's probably better for folks to kind of do that kind of thing versus just kind of hang, because I see a lot of people kind of compensate too much, and I'm always looking at ways that I can create good habits for people to do this on their own. So if I show them the wrong thing, then they'll start to do way too many things that are compensatory and be too it won't really serve its purpose. So we just have to make sure we're working on ways to get that moving. And so yeah. So this is super important. Sometimes I do work in there, but just trying to balance out. I look at the whole picture of everything. Definitely part of the huge picture. A lot of times people are tight in the rectus femoris, which is that muscle from here down to the knee, and those muscles kind of pull the hip forward. That creates a lot of back issues. So
Okay.
so can we open up that as well? It just depends on when we do certain tests. You go, whoa, yeah, you're really tight there, and we just need to focus on more quad-based things versus the deep psoas muscles. So pushing around there, people do the things with a deep ball or like a all sorts of things pressing in there. I mean, on your right side, you have an appendix, and you do want to push through and just crush it. A lot of people are, kind of trying doing smashes and stuff. I'm not a fan of those kind of things. That's a little bit off topic, but it is like trying to get you some ability for that tissue to lengthen, and just kind of thinking in functional movements that we can get that little bit more hip flexion, a little bit more extension, so we can move better. So.
Well, while we're on that topic, is the smashes that you were talking about with those psoas release the same as like foam rolling and lacrosse ball rolling for to activate the Golgi tendon response?
That's what you're trying to do with that, and a lot of times people will feel like they get some movement and better. I mean, it feels good. If you're getting some range with that, then you go ahead and try that. It's okay. I just tell people, like, this is a thing of caution, like with something a little too sharp, and like, especially when you're pushing, you're literally going through your intestines and stuff to get your gut structures in the way. So I try to tell people some other ways to do that, and at least get through some movements that in a different way. If you have a licensed healthcare person that really kind of knows where they're going, but these global smashes, I'm probably not much of a fan of that. That you can, maybe that's a little bit of a controversy back and forth, but whatever people find to be helpful, and explore that. But I'm always like trying to minimize those kind of risks, even if they're super small. I don't want to have anything that causes an issue. So
Don't have a structure like a bone to push against, then you wouldn't recommend it. But other types of foam rolling, like peroneals or glutes or hamstrings, even things like that, is that the same as stretching, or is that a different thing for your muscles?
yeah, I mean, it's stimulating, like you said, talked about the Golgi tendon. You're kind of creating some release tissue in there. I also do like the scraping tools, which is the gua sha, it creates the kind of scraping. It just basically kind of surface deep though. I mean, it's kind of getting at that, it's influencing that. I think again with that, I find people will get some relief when they really do incorporate the breath with it. I think
Mm-hmm.
people are mentality with that is just let's go, and it hurts, and like I'm gonna tough it out. It's really just I found the most relief when I've been consistent with my foam rolling as well. So like, when I do it regularly, it helps. So, but if you're not going to do it regularly, I'm like, not even worth doing. That's what my point. That's my view. Like, if you do
Right,
it once a week, I feel like it doesn't really do much of anything. But
right.
if you get in a habit, and every day, every day in front of the TV, you're doing some sort of that type of thing, then you can kind of get that release, and it'll start to feel like, oh yeah, I'm opening up a bit more, because you're
Yeah.
relaxing a little bit more. You're used to it. Your body's not like, the first time you get you get on your rough calf or something, and you're like, Ooh, baby, it's tight. It's really uncomfortable, but starting light, getting into it, you're basically kind of just sending that signal to the nervous system. I think it just kind of all comes back to a lot of that. It's like, nervous system to be relaxed and be able to take that stimulus and be able to relax and breathe through it. And that will cause more of that relaxation, elongation that we can get. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I'll ask a last question that's more semantical than anything, because there's a big controversy when I go to different conventions and things like that. They're talking about how stretching is becoming kind of obsolete in quotes, because it's probably a misnomer. Does it really lengthen the muscle,
Yeah.
or should we be more of a cool down and a warm up? And then how do we cool down and warm up in different ways that prevent us from injury? And is there a difference? And I know the answer, I'm just setting you up for a question, between dynamic and static.
Okay. Yeah. And I claim to know almost no answers at all, but I do my best from my perspective. So yeah, so like the beginning, like warming up, I mean, we're always just trying to get the body just moving a bit, and we just try not to do anything static to begin, right? You're just trying to get your body moving, get a heart rate up, get the lymphatics flowing, and then you can start to prime for your more of our main activities, which during your activities, you might be going and exploring those deeper ranges of motion. And I've kind of leaning more towards that fact of like a lot of times these long duration stretches that, we've kind of been maybe conditioned to do at the end of a workout. Like I still do a few of them because I feel like they just feel good for me and they work for me. And so I think that's a little bit what you got to explore for yourself. But, I've kind of liked these things where, especially when you're going through certain ranges and you're kind of going deeper and you're kind of going back and forth. And, you think about like, animals kind of just move and I think they don't do the thing where you just hold it, statically for a certain amount of time. Right. So, that's kind of where a lot of that data is coming from. And I think that's kind of going to keep showing that kind of thing that like stretching itself probably doesn't create that, huge game changer that we may have thought it is. It's just more, hey, can we get you more active through those whole ranges, making sure as we get deeper into those, like for example, that deeper split squat or something, that we're supported with it, that we're comfortable in our joints, and that we can kind of start getting further along with that kind of thing through just moving the human animal. And then also then making sure different things with banded floss or something like that to create mobilization with that motion. So if you're stuck or locked in your hip, for example, hey, can I do something to distract your hip as you move through it so you can have a smoother motion? A lot of times that's not due to like a muscle attachment at the point. It's more like capsular, fascial, all these layers that we need to take notice of. That it's not, one of the therapists I learned from a long time ago said there's no such thing as a muscle. And the point was, he said, it's just a fascial structure and there's all these different compartments we call muscle. So just thinking about it in that way, that's the way it's really helped me to view how a human animal needs to move, and that how we're looking at global patterns first, go from whole to parts versus like, oh, this ankle, I need to just work that. Yes, there's parts as we look at the whole and go, boy, that is a contributory thing why I can't squat, and I need to work on that. But a lot of times we need to kind of encompass the whole thing. So
Yeah.
hopefully it makes sense.
Probably even a debate right now whether bone is fascia or not, and I love that because I mean it acts sometimes like that. It even puts out fight or flight response like other fascia,
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
but not to go off on a tangent because we could geek out all day and we're running out of time. But I love this topic. Maybe we should continue more about fascia and like Tom Meyer's work and different things like that, and
Oh, absolutely.
how we integrated
Here, I think. Yeah, I see him back there.
anatomy
There he
trains
is. Yeah.
the slings. Yeah, love it. So yeah, well, we can keep going on that topic, but just close it up a little bit. Keep in mind, Trent has a chi running class that he does regularly. And speaking of a class that Trent does, he's going to be speaking next week. If you're listening to this week, it's next Tuesday here at Northwest Personal Training. It'll be at 6:45 on the 26th. And then next month after that, we've got our spring makeover challenge. And then the following speaker after that in May is going to be Aaron Starkey. So we got lots coming up. And then anything else you'd like to speak about to promote?
No, that's great. I'm looking forward to next week. Get you going on the foot and ankle. There are lots of cool things. We'll make it interactive. It'll be a good time. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for who's been checking this out. And if you've got friends or family that need to hear some of this information, definitely forward the information. And if you want more information that we haven't talked about yet, or if you have questions that we wanted that you want us to discuss, leave some comments in the comment section with whatever social media. And if we see it, then we will answer it. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you again next time.
All right. Thanks, Nick.